Alright guys, so for my first hot take, I have Lord of Order is the best free-to-play class in the game, not Chaos Avenger. I say this for two reasons. One, here's the first reason. Ever since the addition of Ultras and Challenge bosses, support has been in a much higher demand than DPS. And because of that, classes like, Stone Crusher, Legion Revenant, etc., Lord of Order, especially Lord of Order, have gone up more in demand than DPS. Because, yeah, the DPS is good, but, like, the support really boosts that DPS further to reach the absurd big orange numbers that you guys see today. And, with Lord of Order, it's increasing strength, it's increasing luck, wisdom, etc., heal, debuffing the opponent. Like, when it comes down to these hardest fights, like Malgor, Gramiel, etc., Lord of Order is on the top one of everyone's demand list, more than Chaos Avenger. Now, the second thing is, Lord of Order has little to no replacements compared to Chaos Avenger when it comes to Ultras and Challenge bosses. What I mean by this is that there are 11 Ultra bosses in the game. You have the Timon Trio, you have Ultra Nogaf, you have Ultra Dage, you have Drago, Darkon, Fire Avatar, Drakith, Malgor, and Gramiel. Because of that, it's just like Lord of Order has no replacements basically when it comes to those fights. It's just that we need Lord of Order. Forget the three other classes, we need Lord of Order due to its unmatched support. Now, Chaos Avenger, while it is like a bulky, tanky DPS, especially paired up with, Ravenous and other forge enhancements to really do crazy damage, it does have competition as being the DPS and Ultras. What I mean by competition, I mean classes such as, you have Guardian, which received absurd buffs this year. You have, you have Lich, which outright replaces it in the King Drago fight due to its stackable DOT against humans. You also have, Virus Doom Knight. You have Chrono Shadow Slayer, which is the best DPS in the entire game currently. And in some cases, you have Quantum Chronomancer, which, it is a support and a soloing class at the same time. So you can understand the amount of replacements that Lord of Order has versus the amount of replacements, Chaos Avenger has. And, another boot is that, Chaos Avenger is locked behind a 4-week Ultra, which really doesn't help its case compared to, like, Lord of Order, or compared to, like, Lord of Order's quest line. So you gotta see where I'm going with here. It's just that, Lord of Order support is completely unmatched. And when I hear, people online saying that Chaos Avenger is the best free-to-play class, if you want to say in terms of damage, definitely, but overall, no. The only thing that Chaos Avenger has going above Lord of Order is damage. While damage is important, it isn't everything. So yeah, that's pretty much, it for the, the first take. Lord of Order is the best free-to-play class, than Chaos Avenger. It's the best free-to-play class in the game, not Chaos Avenger, because due to the current climate where like all the hardest fights are behind multiple player lobbies rather than solo lobbies. Let's just say in the future, if we do get like soloable versions of all the Ultras, then we could probably flip that greater than symbol around. But until then, at the moment with these multiple people fights, support is everything. Alright then, let's move on to the next. For my next hot take, I just have Void High Lord isn't the best DPS anymore, and it isn't the best soloing class anymore. It's time to let it go. Excuse me. The thing about Void High Lord is that, yeah, it had a reign of dominance in the game as being the best PvP class, the best, soloing class, and the best DPS class, during its prime, like the late 2010s. But like going into like the 2020s and whatnot, I mean 2020 it still had a dominant showing, and 2021, they get buffed again. And then it's just kind of like around, what was it, 2022, 2023, it received like a gigantic nerf where like two of its skills are short range instead of infinite range, which really hurt the class a lot, when it comes down to like ultras and challenge bosses, to the point it's just like Void High Lord, that's pretty much all that it is. Damage. And like I said earlier, damage is important, but it isn't everything. And it's just like we have a lot more classes now. We have a lot better classes now that do damage, 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 and a lot more. We have Chrono Shadow Slayer, which, is the best DPS in the entire game, with easy, 100 to like 500k nukes. You have Chaos Avenger, which, is a tanky, debuffing DPS class, you know, paired up with Forge enhancements. It can really go nice. I mean, Void Hyler can also go well with Dauntless and other stuff as well, but just like Chrono Shadow Slayer and Chaos Avenger are better. Like, it's even to the point it's like it's competing with like stuff like Virus Doom Knight, you know, with it like, even with like Dauntless and whatnot. You have Guardian, which is just like has received some absurd buffs lately to the point it's like, whoa. It's like you could say that like Guardian and like Sentinel are like better than Void High Lord. And it really just shows us like, the downfall of Void High Lord. Because it's like I still see people defending it like it's still like it's 2017, 2018, 2019 again. Like I get it, that was its prime. It was dominating. But now, its time in the sun is over. So it's just like still people trying to tout like Void Hylord is like the best soloing class in the game, best DPS, and it's just like it's plain not true. Those people are just like holding on to nostalgia of the late 2010s and are, afraid to move on. I'm going to admit that, yeah, Guardian is straight up better, Sentinel is better. Like, it's just like, even then, Void High Lord isn't really, really used in the meta right now. You could probably say like a couple of challenge bosses, you could say, but like when it comes to ultras, it's like, it's in the sense of like, why would I use Void High Lord when there's Chrono Shadow Slayer, when there's Chaos Avenger, when there's Quantum Chronomancer, when there's Virus Doom Knight, when there's even like Dragon of Time. Why you? That's kind of like where Void High Lord is right now, in my opinion. It's like it's still great for like for solo play. Like it's still one of the greats, but it's not what it used to be. It's basically a shell of its former self now, and now it has like a plethora of replacements: Guardian, Sentinel, Chaos Avenger, Chrono Shadow Slayer, etc. All right then, you know that's pretty much it. It's time to move on, guys. It's time to move on. All right then, let's move on with the next hot. All right, for my next hot take, I have ultras and challenge bosses have been a mostly healthy addition to the game. And the reason why I say this was, oh, before I understand, get your torches and pitchforks ready in the comment section about your painful experience about. By the way, I'm gonna ask a question. In the comment section below, what has been your worst experience with ultras? You know, doesn't have to be from this list, just like worst ultra experience, like at all. Comment section right there. I want to hear them. So yeah, before ultras, it was just prime void high lord just strangling everything. Just oh, what's the point of support when there's like four void high lords over there making everything easy? To the point it's like you have the community saying the game's too easy, we need a challenge, yada yada yada. So so the devs basically heard you guys out and made these ultra bosses where, you can't solo them. They have boss shields and basically you can't solo them. So you can't just go, caveman void high lord or caveman DPS. We actually need like a group of four or a group of seven, you know, whatnot, discuss strategy. And because of it, now we got these bosses and we got less and less people saying that, oh, the game needs a challenge, X class makes everything easy, too easy. Hey, the devs heard you out and then they gave you guys the ultra bosses. And because of that, we've heard less and less of that. And now it promotes like, team cooperation, even we're working with randoms, you know, just, studying the bosses, doing your research instead of just, caveman DPS. No, trying to revert, trying to like stay away from just like caveman DPS style. Give you guys one of the best resources to get golden experience plus the insignias. Now, I understand that like here's where like the cons about ultras. It's like yeah, you have your share of like trolls and rage baiters, and then the good stuff is locked behind weekly insignias, which is it's it's tiring. I know to some people it's very frustrating, but it prevents it helps out against botting since it's a weekly quest. You know, that's always good and whatnot. So it's just like promotes teams, promotes comps, you know, promotes research about the ultras, what to bring, yada yada yada. Just overall, just like I believe that the whole point of ultras is to like promote cooperation among amongst the 4 to 7 players instead of just like caveman unga bunga DPS call it a day and then go online and say that the game is too easy. I just believe that ultras, as we are gonna get more in the future, don't get me wrong, some of them are very frustrating, but they aren't impossible to defeat. They are beatable and whatnot. And because of that, people online on the subreddit in AQ Worlds, they've been posting up charts, how-to guides, and it's just like it promotes a mostly healthy, game style. It's like, okay, I know how to beat this, I know what the comps are, I know what to do. It basically builds actual strategies than before with caveman DPS. Now, who knows? Maybe in the future they'll probably make soloable versions of all the Ultra bosses. Probably, probably they will. Probably never. We'll have to wait and see. All right then. That's pretty much it for this hot take. Now let's move on to. All right, for my last hot take, I have Void High Lord and Legion Revenant have kind of changed how AQ Worlds does class design forever. Now let me explain. Void High Lord was made, you know, around like what 2017, and it had an immediate impact. It was like one of the best classes, like a top 2 class in PvP. Its soloing was like dominant. Damage like at the time of its release, even throughout the nerfs and whatnot, Void High Lord is still a great class today. But at the time of its prime, like I said, it had like a hold on the meta to the point it was like little to few, you know, replacements. I mean, you had Great Thief and you had Shadow Stalker of Time, but those were pay to win options as well. And then you have Legion Revenant, which was made like, later on, and it's like due to its very low maintenance, it's just like low maintenance, mana cost ain't really a problem, infinite range. It was just this became like one of the best farming classes in the game with like little to no substitutes. I mean, all you really had was like what Vampire Lord at the time and like Master of Moglins, but Master of Moglins was behind a $130 paywall, which still to this day you can kind of say like a literal handful of people have. Now, what do I mean by these two kind of changed the game? It's because of that I feel like one of the main reasons why like we see these classes become like underwhelming on release is just that they basically don't want to see these classes overperform on release. It's kind of like you could say in a sense it's like Void High Lord overperformed on release. You could say like Legion Revenant overperformed on release when it came to farming. And because of that, I mean they've received buffs, whatnot. That is just like it became it. Let me just say this. It reached a point where like right around you kind of say 2019, 2020, before Ultras, these were the only 2 classes that you needed and nothing else mattered. And because of that, obviously it creates, lack of diversity, lack of variety. It's just, if you want farming, go to Legion Revenant. If you want soloing Void High Lord, what's the point of support? With like, necrotic sort of doom, that's really all that you needed to thrive in the game back then. And you can also say this is like one of the main reasons why ultras were created, to stop this, lack of diversity, and promote, more class options. And I feel like due to the dominant run that like Void High Lord had, it's like they don't want to create like another overpowering soloing class that isn't locked behind a 6k AC paywall. That's kind of like you see other DPS classes. You see like Veer's Doom Knight, underwhelming on release. You see Arcana Invoker. You see Hollowborn Vindicator, which people are still hoping that it gets buffs in the future. And then you have, you have Martial Artists. Oof, man, I feel like another main reason why they make those classes as underwhelming as they were on release is to make sure that that they don't start like an upbringing of this again, where like all you need is like these two classes and nothing else matters. Because if you you had to be there around like those times where like all people's inventories was looking like was Void High Lord and Legion Revenant. I mean, if they were like a super pay to win or they were super on PvP, you'll probably see like a few others like Great Thief, Shadowstalker, etc. But it's just like you gotta look at the run that Void High Lord had, and you gotta look at still to this day, Legion Revenant is still known as like the best class in the game. Because of that, I feel like they make the classes like underwhelming slash how some people even say rushed to make sure that we don't have another overperforming class like like how Void High Lord and Legion Revenant did around the late 2010s and around 2020 as well, basically before Ultras and whatnot. Because they're like they don't like it when a class is overperforming. Look at Guardian. Like, what was it? Didn't they just nerf Guardian like a week after they buffed it because it was considered overperforming? But even then, the little nerf was basically the equivalent of a slap on the wrist, and Guardian's still known as one of the best DPS class and party classes today. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for this hot take. If you're wondering why classes are kind of like underwhelmed, why classes are like underwhelming or like they need like a buff a week or two after release, it's kind of make sure they don't want to like recreate the dominant run that like Void High Lord and Legion Revenant can get, that most players can get, rather than dropping $20 to $30 on a 6k chrono. They just don't want to recreate that, and then it promotes like lack of variety. That's what this game wants to do, is like promote variety, promote options. That's why like different comps for like ultras and challenge bosses are there, so we don't have to go back to like an era where it's just like all you need is 4 classes, and that's it. Promoting variety in these fights. Alright then, that's pretty much been it for the AQ World's Hot Takes video. Make sure to like, subscribe for more content. And yeah, hi guys out. Sorry for the wait.